welcome back to our channel. I'm Michelle.
And I'm Steph. And today we are excited to show you 5 different DIY high-end dupes, and we're going to be recreating them from
Anthropologie, Pottery Barn, West Elm, and Grandin Road. We found all of these pumpkins at our local thrift store, and hopefully you'll be able to find something in your area that you can transform them your own with us.
And as always, you can head to the description box below for a list of supplies for each of these pumpkin dupes.
For our first high-end dupe, we are going to take this glass pumpkin that's really like a candy jar, and we're going to transform it into this beautiful Anthropologie inspired dupe with some paint and rub and buff and turn it into a fabulous candle for fall. So we're going to just raise it up and first give it a coat of black paint. Now that the paint is dry on our glass pumpkin, we are going to give it this metallic effect that is just like the Anthropologie looking candle. And we're going to achieve this with rub and buff. So if you haven't tried rub and buff before, it comes in a little tube like this. So what I'm going to do is just open it, and I'm going to squeeze out a little bit on a plate here. And I find it easier to just use my fingers to apply the rub and buff. On the lid, I did have to use a paintbrush to get into some of these grooves where my finger just wouldn't fit. But for the most part, I can use my finger, and it's going to give it kind of that mottled gold, aged gold effect. And this color of rub and buff that I am using is called Antique Gold. So I'll just pick up a little bit of the rub and buff on my finger and kind of blend it around. I don't want a big glob on here. And then I'm just going to kind of rub it onto the pumpkin here. And the reason we painted this black is it's going to, in the grooves, you're not going to get the rub and buff quite as defined in there. And so it's going to allow the ribs in the pumpkin to stand out a little bit better. And we're going to get more depth and detail into this pumpkin because we painted it black first. Also, one thing to note is rub and buff will not stick to glass. It will stick to etched glass, but not to the sheen of a polished glass. And so we had to put the flat black paint on it in order for the rub and buff to stick. So I'm just using an old soft washcloth, and I'm just going to take this first section that I worked on, and I'm just going to buff it. Okay, so now you can see it's smooth, it's dry, and it's got a lovely sheen to it. So we'll just keep working our way around. I'll work on the next section, and then we'll buff. By using this metallic rub and buff, it's going to give us that high-end dupe that we want for this project. It's going to give it that lovely sheen, just like the original piece from Anthropologie. All right, now we're just going to give it a final buffing, and this outer portion of our high-end dupe is going to be finished. And we have one more step we're going to take with this piece. You see the beautiful sheen that's coming as we buff it. All right, there we have it.
The last thing that we did to recreate this Anthropologie high-end dupe was to actually make a candle, since their glass pumpkin was a candle. So we're not going to go into a lot of detail on that here. There are a lot of tutorials out there that you can watch on how to make candles, but we just melted our beeswax, added a fun fall scent, and now we have a beautiful candle just like the original.
Our next pumpkin we're going to make is inspired from Grandin Road, And this is actually just an apple that we picked up at the thrift store, and we're going to use this as our base. I think we can make this work to look like a pumpkin. So pull off the stem first, because we'll be putting in a better stem.
The first thing we're going to do on this is just attach this rope in these ribbed sections of the apple to kind of help mimic the lines of the pumpkin. We're just going to use a little bit of hot glue for that. Now to create all of that detailing on the pumpkin, we're going to use some thumbtacks and just press them into this apple. Now to create the stem and the little curlicues, we're going to soak a piece of jute in some water for a minute to make the curlicue. While that's soaking, I just have a little twig branch that I'm just going to glue on the top of our pumpkin. Then we took a knitting needle and wrapped the jute all the way around it to make our little curlicue. And you can use some metal skewers or anything that you can stick in the oven. So we just have a knot on the end there and also over there just to help it stay wrapped while we bake it.
So we let the twine sit in the oven for 15 minutes. It was at 350, and that is just the heat of the oven just dries the jute and you get this fun little curlicue. So what I'm going to do is just attach it, and then we're going to go ahead and paint this. We're now ready to give this a coat of paint, and we are going to just use this Rust-Oleum metallic gold.
And once the paint has dried, this pumpkin will be finished, and you could add more detail. We didn't add as much as the original, but it is still a pretty good dupe. And for our next high-end dupe, we're recreating these pumpkins to look like these West Elm pumpkins. And again, we're just going to start with a coat of spray paint. It's paint and primer in one. We are using a glossy finish here, and we also allowed it to dry overnight so that it wouldn't pull up any paint with our next step. For the next step on this high-end dupe, we're going to take some frog tape and mask off about 2/3 of the pumpkin up top. And it doesn't have to be perfect, especially where the pumpkin is rounded. Just make sure you have a good seal. And then we are going to use our rub and buff again to create that gold dip effect on the bottom half. And you could use gold spray paint, which would be super easy. You would just want to make sure that the top portion was masked off as well. So we're just going to use our finger with this like we did on our other pumpkin. A little bit goes a long way. And you literally just rub it on, kind of like you're finger painting. And we'll let that dry for a minute before we buff it. Let us know down in the comments if you've ever used rub and buff. They do have other colors, and you can do quite a lot of fun things with them. Now we're just going to use our cloth and buff it to get that nice sheen. Then we can remove the frog tape. have a beautiful gold dipped high-end pumpkin dupe. These West Elm dupes were super easy to do, and I think we'll be heading to the thrift store looking for more pumpkins because we love them. For our next high-end dupe, we're going to recreate these pumpkins from Pottery Barn. We have cleaned these just with some soapy water, let them dry, and we're going to just give them a coat of white spray paint to begin. Paint and primer in one. When you're planning to spray paint, it's really helpful to prop your items up on a scrap piece of wood, or we like to use canned goods. It just helps you get underneath everywhere you need to get, and it also prevents it from sticking to your table.
Okay, to finish off our Pottery Barn inspired high-end dupe, we're going for this look here, which kind of to me has a look of maybe carved wood or something, kind of an aged look to it. And I'm going to use just the sample paint that I had. It's actually just a bare color called Garden Wall. It's kind of a grayish kind of a color. I put it out here on my plate, and I'm just going to wet my paintbrush, dab off a little bit of water. I want it to be fairly wet, the first coat I put on, and I'm going to just first go ahead and just dab some paint on where the leaves were, the stem, and then what I'm going to do is just take a dampened coffee filter, and I'm just going to kind of dab it around just to kind of give it a mottled effect. This is kind of the same technique that I used when I was doing the Pottery Barn inspired vases. So it's just kind of the same technique to kind of get a little bit of that color here and there. And if you don't want to take off as much, just use a dry coffee filter. Okay, so I'm going to spin it around and work on this leaf here, the stem.
And don't be afraid with the paint either, because it's meant to be imperfect. Yep. So there's no mistakes made.
Just playing around. Okay. Now I'm going to kind of add that same look, this time in the creases or crevices. What would you call this part of the pumpkin? Oh, I don't know. Is there a real name for that? I don't even know.
Comment below if you know.
Yeah, so let us know, because I don't know.
When we film, our minds go blank, so there probably is.
Okay. Now I'm going to take the wet coffee filter and just kind of tap that color around. So it's getting a little bit of color here, but most of the color is staying in the cracks, which is exactly what I'm wanting to do. So I'm going to let that dry for just a second, and then we're going to come back and add a little bit more definition to it. All right, so now I'm just going to define these little crevices on the pumpkin. I'm going to pick up a little bit of paint on my paintbrush, and this time I'm just tapping in the crevice. That's the only area I'm going to tap. And then I'm going to take a dry coffee filter. I want to keep it a little more defined in this area, so I'm not going to try to pull off as much color with a damp coffee filter. So you see the look that I'm getting now, a little more defined, making those crevices stand out a little bit. So just tapping the color in.
If you feel like you're not liking this look, then just go back to your damp one and pull off a little bit more paint.
Oh yeah.
It's all give and take.
Right, and it's real easy to do that too.
Once you're happy with the distressing you've created, you can just allow them to dry and style them up.
For our next high-end pumpkin dupe, this one is inspired by West Elm, and I've taken several pieces of raffia, probably about 12 to 16 pieces here, and I've just knotted them at the top. And I'm just going to secure it to my countertop while I work, and we're just simply going to do just a basic braid. And I know this looks kind of tedious, but it actually goes pretty fast once you get going. When you first start out, it gets a little tangled, but once you get going down, it works a little faster. When you get to the end, we're just going to simply just tie a knot to hold it in place before we attach it to the pumpkin. And for this one, we're using just a cheap dollar store pumpkin that we're going to just transform.
For the next step on this dupe, we are going to wrap our braided raffia all the way around the pumpkin. We're going to start with one whole piece there, and then I think we'll just work in sections. And we're going to just attach this with hot glue. And we're going to cut the knot off once this is all glued into place. We just didn't want it coming undone. So it probably doesn't need a ton of glue, but we'll just do a little bit down. Now I'm going to apply my next one across the middle this way so we can section it off. And if you don't want to burn your fingers, you can use a little popsicle stick. Make sure that's stuck down there. Now we can just focus on 1/4 of the pumpkin at a time as we glue this on. So this is really easy to do. Once you have all of your raffia braids, just glue it on, and this is going to be a really cute pumpkin at a fraction of the cost too.
Yeah, to me it's going to have that really coastal kind of a farmhousey vibe to it because of the texture. It's going to be super cute.
So as I got working closer to the middle, I started another section. I think that'll just help them stay a little bit more unified instead of them starting out really long on the outsides and getting really short toward the middle. So we're just going to finish filling in that area and move on to the rest of the pumpkin. Out of all 5 pumpkins, this is the most time-consuming one, but it really isn't difficult to do. So if you have a little bit of patience, you can make this work, and you really just fill in all of the little spaces covering that foam pumpkin, and then you're finished. For the stem, we're just using a twig from the yard, and we're just going to wrap the raffia around it and hot glue it into place. And that's it for our 5 high-end dupes. Let us know down in the comments below which one is your favorite and if you'll be attempting to recreate these for your own home. And also subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of our new DIY videos we share every week. And as always, here at Sunnyside Design, we hope to bring your home to the sunny side of the street.